Hello, good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Finance and Public Services Overview and Scrutiny panel. For the purposes of this meeting, it is being recorded and will be published on the NBBC YouTube channel in due course. Just like to start the meeting, as this is the first one of this municipal year, by thanking all those members who attended the panel last year and not here this year for their contributions, and also to welcome those new members of the panel this year, and let's hope we can do some good work. To begin with, item 1 is the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs, do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Virgin Money building or on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure that your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. Thank you.
At the last meeting here, we were told the rear fire exits weren't working. Is that now been sorted?
Can we confirm? Can we check that and make sure then, please? Moving on to item 2, apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Harbison. I believe that Councillor Downs is en route, so he'll join us as soon as he can. Item 3 is the minutes of the last meeting. Is everybody okay for me to sign the minutes of the meeting? Councillor Condacott.
Thank you. Although I wasn't on the panel, I was actually attending the beginning of that meeting. 2 issues I wanted to raise. The data quality issue wasn't actually minuted correctly. The data presented to the panel, some of it was a copy of a 22 data copied into 23. And I think the officer was going to provide an update to Councillor Wright, which hasn't happened. So that would be a useful thing to clarify. And secondly, there was the discussion about fly tipping fines, and the officer mentioned that we now issue littering fines in some cases, and that is not recorded in the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to have the minutes recorded to adjust the fact about the fines being discussed at the meeting, because it was discussed. Subject to that, everybody happy for me to sign the minutes? Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declaration of interest to make that are not recorded in the schedule? No, thank you. I'll move on to item number 5, which is public consultation. Mr. Smith, I note that you're here and that you've asked to speak on a number of items. I'll call you at the beginning of each item if that's okay, or would you prefer to speak on all of them now? Thank you. So moving on to item 6, questions to Cabinet. We have both portfolio holders here. I'd like to welcome Councillor Croft and Councillor Markham. Thank you for attending. Over to the members of the panel if they have any questions for the members of the Cabinet. Councillor Condacott.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the Cabinet being here. First, for Councillor Croft, we haven't got any financial information presented to the panel tonight, and the latest financial information goes right the way back to December. So I wouldn't mind if Councillor Croft could give us an update on the expected year outturn, particularly bearing in mind at the last planning meeting, what might have been the one before, the leader of the council was mentioning we had a £3 million surplus deficit coming up. So I think it would be useful to have a clarification of the financial position in terms of the revenue account for the year that's just ended. And to make it easy, the next question I would want to ask then is where we are with the medium-term financial plan, because that has regularly been promised to members, so we can see where we're going forward with all our major projects and the financial implications of those. Thank you.
Councillor Croft, would you like to answer?
Of course I can. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The figures aren't in this report because the year-end process is still ongoing. We haven't actually finalised the accounts yet. That's partly due to the fact that we've got the new team in place and it's taking a little longer than we'd like. Partly there are some outstanding audit queries on the previous year and we can't get the opening balances right to finalise the accounts. But that will be coming over the summer. It will end up pretty much in line with run rate from the Q3 figures. So it will be about 900,000 adrift from the budget in year. As I outlined at the budget setting in February, effectively, so we'd spent 560,000 extra on homeless, 100,000 extra on audit fees because it took so long, but we'd upped the recycling income and the planning income. The £3 million deficit that Councillor Wilson was referring to, I obviously wasn't there, so I must presume from what Councillor Condacour says, but that's referring to the deficit we had to close in the budget we've just set, so the budget for 23-24, but also the fact that our projections show there is an ongoing deficit. There will have to be savings made in future financial years, so there won't be 3 million adrift in the year we've just closed, but that is still very much a live issue. And we'll be able to do budget monitoring from the Q1 for 23-24, getting the financial years right, shortly to this OSP once we've got the final outturn finished. In terms of the medium-term financial plan, the final document's going to have to wait until we finalise the accounts because we need to get the base position ready so that we know what we're working from. But I hope that answers the question.
Well, just to follow up on that, thank you for giving me an outturn estimate. I know it's with some uncertainty, but how much of that 900,000, because it was about £1 million the year before as well, so you've been about 2 million out in your first 2 years as administration. How much of that systematic error do you expect then to occur in this year, or have those financial miscalculations or misestimates, whatever you want to call them, been taken out of the system now, so this year you'd expect to be about right?
Well, part of the answer to that is, of course, if we knew that, and if we knew what would change in year, if we knew what would go awry, it wouldn't have gone awry in year. But we've been much more conservative in the most literal sense of the word this year. So, for example, we've put in the 1.3 million transformation and, I've forgotten the word we used, but contingencies reserve into the budget, which gives us much more of a fiscal stabiliser for if and when we have any unforeseen things like the economic troubles we had last year, which nobody foresaw 10% inflation. We hadn't had 5% pay rises for a very long time in this country, so we've built in an air buffer, effectively, to absorb some of those shocks should they recur. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Councillor Condacour.
Thank you very much. This is for Councillor Markham. A lot of this refers to areas before your portfolio holder, but obviously a big uncertainty is the Civic Hall, and I think it was supposed to go out to the bidders around yesterday or today. I don't know if that's happened, but one of the things we've established is there was a lot of, shall I say, political interference with the consultant's report, which has been established in terms of the base level of the Civic Hall. If you remember, there was a consultant's report that forgot the pantomime, and we're now understanding that the previous portfolio holder had asked for conversations and various things about that. So I'd ask, are we doing a clean sweep or a reset of what data we've got to make sure that it is sound in terms of what we're giving to the bidders, particularly in terms of the work needed to the Civic Hall, because they're bidding blind if they don't know about the boilers and any issues. Thank you.
Yeah, some of the stuff is still the same, the boilers and stuff, because that hasn't been altered since the actual estimates have been done. But we have had, we've ordered, I think it's happening on Monday, We've asked for somebody else to come in to have a look at the asbestos. So they've got an up-to-date report on the asbestos, and they've also got, they'll have an up-to-date report on other things that are actually in there that need doing. So everything that they get will be up to date when they get their pack.
Councillor Condor, you wish to ask another question?
Well, it's just to follow up on that. So I take it the process hasn't started then yet because of the extra information you've had to get. And do they know how long they're bidding for? Because the other question was, it was less than 25 years, but is it their choice how long they bid for?
Right, so the bid itself is up to them to negotiate when it comes in. So they will get the pack. The dates will be, it should have started already, so those dates will be extended because we couldn't do anything because of the time that the actual cabinet report was published. So it already put it out by about a week. So and until we get the end of that period, but what will happen is it will just be added on the end. It won't be shortened. They'll get exactly the same time as that's actually been advertised. So they won't be penalised for that.
Any further questions at all? That being the case, we can move on to item 7, cultural strategy, where I believe that we have a report here from, on this one. Do we want to take the report? Or would you want to speak first, Mr. Smith? Take the report.
Thank you, Councillor. So the objective here was obviously to share the cultural strategy for the borough. As part of the NBBC plan to build a better borough, to make Nuneaton and Bedworth the place for our residents to live, work and visit, and a sense of pride in the borough, culture has a strong part to play within that. And this cultural strategy outlines the ways that culture can help us build towns and our vision, and also help us find a shared sense of identity and civic pride. We're going to share a film now, which has been pulled together that summarises that cultural strategy with members of the community and partners to give an understanding of the work that was done behind that. Unfortunately, I think there's some issues with the sound on this video. However, there are some subtitles, and we will circulate the link to this video to members after this session this evening. Victoria, are you sharing the screen, or do you want me to? Do you want me to? I can do that. hopefully that was visible and you were all able to see that presentation, and hopefully appreciate without the sound it's not ideal, but you should be able, we'll share that after, but hopefully it gave you an idea of what that cultural strategy work involved and what some of the themes were that came out of that. There are pressures on how to invest funding, especially for local authorities to support communities. And obviously the context of the cultural strategy will help to aim to identify the priorities for this sector. I think obviously just reflecting on the last 12 months, and it was evident within the film, but with the sanctuary event was a massive cultural activity. We've obviously currently got the Knife Angel, and we were also able to get funding from Arts Council England for the Creative Explorers project, which is starting later this year. So there's a lot of stuff that's already happening within the borough, but hopefully this cultural strategy will help for the priorities and understand exactly what culture means to the borough and what those priorities are moving forward, and hopefully will give us a bit more leverage for funders to understand that, you know, our priorities and that we do value it as an important part of the borough. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. I'd like now to take Mr. Smith, you've registered to speak on this item. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to take that little episode to task a bit. An extensive consultation process conducted and engaging stakeholders, targeted local communities and cultural organisations, the wider public across the borough. A strong level of engagement was achieved using these methods, and feedback gathered from the process is rich and in-depth, which is a complete and utter travesty. Who makes this stuff up, I don't know. Obviously following the City of Culture in Coventry example, which ended up in bankruptcy and a lot of money going missing. The arts, proven to be an easy way of getting rid of public money on projects that don't really produce anything. We've got two examples in the borough, £98,000 for £4,000 worth of scrap metal. Yeah. The Saints building, you know where to spend your money. These people were involved in the consultation project. The Saints building, £2.35 million for a religious cult with very little support or doing very little in the borough. Yeah? The museum has been starved of funds and having staffing cuts has left it unable to open. The Nuneaton town centre is terribly congested, a situation that will only get worse with your plans to build on every ground floor car park in the borough. The Abbey Street car park has been an unmitigated disaster.
If I could just ask you to speak to the agenda. The car park's not part of the cultural strategy.
It's part of the agenda. Yeah? It's all part of this building back better, a better borough. Yeah? It's been an unmitigated disaster for the town, driving residents away to other shopping areas. £500,000 in revenue lost, and £250,000 visits to the town centre that will never probably return. Nothing that is proposed for the area is wanted or needed by the residents of the borough. The car park was wanted and needed to ensure the future of the market town and the existing businesses. Transforming Bedworth will be another disaster as the one in Nuneaton has been, with the same suspects involved in that project. The continuing involvement of people responsible for the satanic ritual in Bedworth is a major concern and points to the reason for this council's toxic attitude to residents. Since this event, the borough has become a more hostile community, with this council leading the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Any member? Councillor Condacott.
It's quite a large report. I think one of the things that have been useful, it mentions lots of responses from CV 10, 11 and 12, but actually a breakdown by ward would be useful, because one of the things we have is we have pockets of culture in this town, and then there's very little out to the west, there's very little out in Wellington, and the report does actually mention transport and parking. I think the location of culture is important, particularly for people with limited means. How much do we have more out at the edges of our town? We used to have some very good centre stage and live and local. We used to have things that went into the various communities. We've been to various things in Wellington, in Bulkington, had loads going on. And so I think the spread of culture, I think, is a really important thing, not just the buildings. I think there's a very valid point about the museum being a grand building with lots of money spent on it, but we've actually got a serious problem if it's not staffed, because we need opening hours. We need, when you bring your friends or in-laws to town, you need something that's open to actually take them to. So I think we do need to look at opening hours, etc. And we got all these pretty pictures, like we got the ones of transforming Bedworth, which clearly is totally unfunded and is just vaporware to distract from the demolishing and closing of the Civic Hall. So I think we do have lots of issues, and we need to be realistic about how we can put culture into our communities. And I think that's why live and local, centre stage and all these things that put stuff into the community venues was really important. Because and actually having staffing, so we actually think of people, not just buildings. I really fear about having a £7 million museum that is almost permanently closed, because we can't, because £7 million at current interest rates of 5% is something like £350,000 a year we need to pay interest on the building. And so high interest rates means we spend all our money on interest rates for the glossy buildings, and we don't have the events. So I don't know if officers has got any ideas on how we get cultural events into our various wards. Thank you, Chair.
Katie, do you have any response to any of the points?
Yep, I think Councillor Condicourt, thank you for the points raised. They'll be noted, and we'll take them back to the wider team to discuss. And obviously, the cultural strategy will be the catalyst of that, of how we engage in those communities and wards more directly. We can absolutely try and gain more further information on that breakdown of the responses from wards. But I think on the back of this cultural strategy going forward, we can obviously tap into those wider communities. And just the point regarding the museum staffing, again, that's absolutely noted, and something that, you know, in line with redevelopment, there would be a review would take place on the staffing and hours of the museum at that point. Thank you, Chair.
Any other speakers? Okay, I've got Councillor Watkins, Councillor Baxter Payne. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you for the report. In this borough, we've got a very, well, I think we're quite lucky to have such a multicultural society. And I'm not sure what you're doing to approach all the different cultures. I know we've not really got a team to go out there and do sort of thing to question everybody, and you pointed out a few places where you'd been. It's just that I would like to think that all the different cultures are involved in things. Also, with the redevelopments of, well, especially Riversley Park, that would be a perfect opportunity to put something central to attract people to stage events, multicultural events, or any sort of event really. But both in Nuneaton and Bedworth, we've hardly ever got anything in the town centres to direct us to the parks, and anything in the parks to direct us to the town centres. So I think that's something that needs picking up. And as for the how the surveys and things was done, I think we should have used our comms a little bit better, because I don't think I've seen anything about asking for opinions of people. So that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Any response to that one, Katie?
And just to comment on noted regarding linking up with different groups across the borough, a lot of work will be being done with our communities team, who have really good links with different cultures across the borough. So I know that the cultural teams and communities team will be working closely together about how we can get into each of those communities and deliver culture or make them aware of cultural activities. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. You want to come back, Councillor Watkins?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm sorry, I'm not picking on you, but when you say communities team, it's about 1 or 2 people. So we haven't really got a communities team. So that's what I'm saying is the consultation needs to be easier for other groups to get involved. Whether it's putting something at the leisure centres or something, it's just that if we're going to do this, I would like to do it right and think that we've not missed opportunities. Because we haven't got a community team. We've got a couple of people, if that. So I would just like to think that the communication is a bit better going forward, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baxter-Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points, one from Councillor Condacor and one from Councillor Watkins. Having read through the strategy, it's a very interesting document, and I think that Councillor Condacor made the point of having pockets of sort of like culture throughout the borough, and but from what I get it from the strategy is to tie that up so that it's a cultural thing across the borough, because culture and arts and entertainment is something that we've all got a different opinion of. What I find interesting as a culture, or what I find interesting as entertainment, might not be for somebody else. So surely the idea of the strategy is to actually bring people together and to have different things. And I was looking at some of the responses, like in Appendix 1, and I think that the gentleman that suggests that we celebrate the heritage and the history of the borough is quite an important thing, because on one of the buildings here it mentions the Weavers' Cottages on the Albion buildings. Having recently done some work on the Albion buildings, I was unaware of the history of that building. That building has quite an important history within this borough and within some of the industries in the country. So I think that it's really good that this document highlights some of the things where we can improve and to promote the borough. And coming up on Councillor Watkins' point, hopefully that this strategy will bring all those cultures together and make them want to come forward and put on events in the town. Because I agree with you, we don't signpost anything we do in the park, or we don't do enough, and we should do. But the strategy is the starting point to getting all those people engaged in what we want to do moving forward. And I think it's it's got some very interesting points in it. And I think it makes some good points, and it's a starting point for how we move forward.
Katie, do you want to pick up any of those points?
No, Chair. Thank you.
In which case I'll move on to Councillor Downs.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at Appendix 2, the consultation results report at the moment, and it says that majority of responses were from postcode CV12, CV10 and CV11. And it also names some places. For example, in September 2022, consultation events were held at, and I quote, Bedworth Civic Hall, the Pringles Leisure Centre, direct emails and Twitter. I'd like to know where in the Civic Hall they held it, because the venue was closed at the time. So where did the event happen for Bedworth, and why did nobody know about it? Because I certainly didn't know about it, Chair. Thank you.
Katie, perhaps you want to pick up on that. That's an important point.
Yeah, that is an important point. I'd need to just check back on that, because you're right, there wasn't anything hosted within the venue. So whether that's a mistype on the location, but it certainly, there was nothing housed within the actual Civic Hall during that time. I can bring that back, Chair.
Thank you. I note that the report does mention a consultation event in the old meeting hall, so perhaps it's a misprint.
Typo. Yeah.
Mrs. Raw.
I think it's a really very comprehensive report. The bits that bother me are the scant references to the environment. We're building a lot of properties in around the borough, and there is nowhere green for people to walk, children to play, etc., etc. We have canals going through this town which are appalling. Talking about walking and cycling. Where do you walk and where do you cycle in Nuneaton? It's almost impossible. If you walk by the canal, it's shameful when you look at the rubbish and the dirt and the greenery in the canals, etc., etc. This town could be made much better. I can remember the days when our parks and what have you came top in competitions and what have you, and so on. Those days have gone, I know. But I just feel that it's really people's environment that really should be the start of anything at all to do with it. Never mind pulling together all of the people with diverse cultures in this town. And I think that'll be like herding cats, believe me, because, you know, it has been tried and tested in other authorities. But I do applaud your report, and I think it's very comprehensive, and I think a lot of effort has gone into it. And I just hope it succeeds. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ross. Katie, do you want to pick up on any of those points, or?
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the comments.
Thank you. Councillor Condacott.
Yeah, I just want to come back on a couple of things. One of which was the consultation in Bedworth. It may have been in Bedworth Arts Centre, which was still open, and I think we do need to look at where we're going with Bedworth Arts Centre, because it hasn't got a Arts Centre at the moment. So I don't know if Katie's got an idea, if it doesn't reopen, what we're doing for that as a small venue. And the second thing on comms, we had that wonderful Sharing the Light event, but lots of people turned up to it. There's a nice picture of it on page 58, and then left before the big things came because people didn't know what they went to see. So I think we need to do a lot more on comms for our events, so people know more what's going on, at least to know it's a 40-minute whatever, so they don't go for 10 minutes and then leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacott. Councillor Watkins, you wish to come back in?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to come back on Councillor Baxpain's observations, really. And I do agree with you that this is a starting strategy for people to put into, but they can only put into it if they know about it. And that's my point. That was my whole point, is the comms needs to be used better. I don't know how we do it. I don't know if we put a banner outside the town hall and outside the civic hall or whatever. I don't know. But we need to communicate to the public that these things are going on, so that when it does happen, we can at least turn around and say, you had your chance. But if we don't let them know, we can't even do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Any more speakers on this particular point? In which case, I've got a couple of points I'd like to raise myself, Katie, if that's okay. I noticed in page 12 of the report, where it's talking about local context and initiatives, that once again, the only significant character we mention from Nuneaton and Bedworth is George Eliot. And I think it's time the borough, whilst recognising the importance of George Eliot, also start to recognise that we have more people that have achieved within the borough than George Eliot, who, whilst important, is perhaps not somebody that many residents actually resonate with. So you know, we have people like Gareth Edwards, the internationally famous film director, who directed the Star Wars Rogue One movie, and when he appeared in person at the Abbey Theatre, tickets were trading online for that at vast sums over and above the face value, because it was literally sold out in minutes. So I think we need something that we can perhaps look at, is looking at celebrating some of the wider celebrities that have come from the borough here. But I do appreciate that this is a first attempt to draw something together, and it's something that's not happened before, and perhaps, yes, we do need to get the communication better. And there are things that are going on within communities that perhaps we're not getting to communicate with. certainly within the community, which is quite significant in the borough. They held an event in Bedworth Miners Welfare Park 2-3 weeks ago, which was very well attended and organised pretty much within their own community, but with help from Warwickshire County Council. And yet, we seem to perhaps not be picking up on that. And also on page 12 under local context initiatives, and we mentioned Warwickshire County Council, I would just like to hope that we can consult better with them when it comes to the introduction of public artworks, because all too often the artworks that are introduced into this borough are done without liaising with local councillors, and are some things that if they had local knowledge we would advise them not to spend the money on in the first place and to do something that people would actually appreciate rather than some of the things that we're presented with as a done deal. So there would be my comments. I would add one final thing on this, that the report we're asked to note. I'm happy for this to be noted, to take it the panel is, but I was going to add one thing because we are recommending this to Cabinet. Could I recommend that it goes to Cabinet with a qualification that once the future of the Civic Hall is known, and that will be known in the short term, that this strategy document is reviewed and updated to reflect that, because there's quite a lot in here about the Civic Hall that will become clearer and need to be reflected in the strategy. Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak.
Yeah, I'm happy with your suggestion, but I also think the Cabinet should have a list of the demographics of which wards and how old, and we usually ask people when they do these surveys which postcode, which ward they live in. So I think some information just to see where we've surveyed would be useful.
I'm happy for that extra information to be provided to Cabinet when they consider this as additional information. Everybody else happy with that? On that basis then, if everybody's happy, the report is noted as per the recommendation and it goes to Cabinet for formal approval with the provisos that we've given. If everybody's happy with that, thank you very much. In which case we can move on to agenda item 8, which is the sports development update, the Active for Life reports. I believe we have a presentation on this.
Thank you, Chair. We've shared as the appendices the detail behind the reports of the full report, so I hope you've received that. So I'm just going to read through some of the headline details from within that. So this is for the period of April 22 to March 23, so the full last financial year. And it's just to give an overview of what's been delivered within the team. So there was the awarding of 8 active grants to community groups and sports clubs. The encouragement of residents of the borough to walk. There was over 200 hours of volunteer walks conducted. And we've got over nearly 2,000 registered attendees on organised walks. We supported with the delivery of the Birmingham 22 Commonwealth Games, the baton relay, which came through the borough, through Nuneaton and Bedworth. And we managed to manage that with the support of 50 volunteers to support with that from various organisations and residents and members that supported with that. In partnership with our leisure provider, Everyone Active, we've actually now delivered 25 health MOTs to Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough staff. Since opening the mountain bike trails in Bedworth, for the full year, we've had just over 53,000 rides, averaging at just over 4,000 a month, which is great to see kind of 1 year, just over 1 year down the line. There's been the launch of the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council employee newsletter, which is being shared regularly, promoting healthy and active lifestyle information. There's been a number of events that have been attended just to promote the Get Active for Life team and support the wider groups that come under that. There's been scootability training hosted in partnership with Warwickshire County Council's road safety team, and 37 children accessed this free provision over the year. And there's been a partnership with Mind, where clubs were encouraged to engage with a funded project to enable them to be more inclusive, break down barriers, and receive training to support them with mental health needs of their users, of their clubs. And we've managed to sign 6 clubs up to that across the borough will be able to support their users with that specialised training that they've received. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. Mr Smith, you'd indicated you wish to speak on this item.
With the borough's leisure facilities being outsourced to private companies, 90% of the physical activities being done by commercial or voluntary groups, the council giving little or no funding to this sector, it's hard to see what involvement the council has in any physical activities, really. The pitches, the facilities for the football teams are very poorly kept. Yeah, there's always complaints about that. You do very little for that side of things. You know what I mean? This council doesn't fund any local groups, really. You've been withdrawing funding since you got in from a lot of groups, community centres. Getting funding out of this council for valid projects is like pulling teeth. Yeah? Obviously, you have other uses for the money, which we won't go into here now. We'll leave that for later. But keep up the good work, young lady, and let's hope they get the money to do something with it.
Thank you, Mr Smith. Any member?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm quite into cycling and do a lot of these activities. And some of the stuff the council does is really good. Me and my wife helped with the baton relay, which I thought was very, very good and encouraged people to do stuff. In commenting on the things that aren't working, I don't want it to put out that the council doesn't do good stuff, because it does. They quite often need better publicity, but there's a lot of good stuff. One of the disasters has been the removal of the skate park in Bedworth. I think so many young people don't join clubs nowadays. They will just go to somewhere where they do activities. And I think we urgently need to look at what we're going to do in Bedworth. Because otherwise people either do the skating around the ring road in Tesco's car park and in unsuitable places, or they won't do the activities at all, and they'll get involved in other stuff. So the stuff we do, like skate parks, is really good for reducing crime, keeping our young people fit. The mountain bike trail has been a success, but it's a particular niche. I've been around there quite often, so I'll count in that 50 whatever. But I do fear we don't publicise it enough, and that could be a tourist attraction. When I do the park runs around Bedworth, we quite often, they start from the start of the mountain bike track, and a lot of people visit park run as a tourist, and they actually talk to me and other people about, oh, that's a nice thing, where did it go and what did it do? So I think we need to do more to advertise it and have it as a tourist attraction, because that would actually then bring some revenue into the CAF at the park and some parking revenue and things. So I think there's positives on that. It's an absolute disaster us not continuing with Eton as a sports centre with public access. Top Farm is going to be years away if it ever happens. When you look at the planning application, it hasn't even got a road connection marked on the planning application. So it's unfunded vaporware as Top Farm Sports Centre. So we really need to discuss what's going on with Eton and try and get it, because it's in such a good location. Abbey Ward, that bit, it's just over the Leicester Road Bridge. It's really buzzing in some evenings, and I think we need to do something more to establish what's going on there. And finally, things like measured miles. It mentions it in the report. That's just so cheap to actually put in Miners Welfare Park, Sandon Park, a little poster was saying measured mile and a line on. You see them in parks all over the country, and they really give people a sense of achievement if you've got half a mile, a mile, because a lot of people don't think they can walk a mile. Well, actually, you walk a mile, 20 minutes, half an hour, without thinking about it. And I think things like measured miles are really positive things to encourage our residents to do stuff and then gradually migrate up to doing little runs or doing those 3 or 4 mile walks. And it's a place we could signpost our council walks, because very few people know the council organise little walks to keep people healthy. If you have some signs and saying, yeah, council walking for health starts here 4 o'clock on a Tuesday or lunchtime on a Wednesday, we can get more people involved in that, improve their health and save the NHS money as well. So yeah, there's lots of positives in here, but there's also things we need to sort out. Thank you.
Mr Smith, you've had your chance to talk. Thank you, Councillor Condacor. I certainly agree with you about the measured mile thing. I know there's one at Bailey Park, but it would be very cheap to do some more. Councillor Hammersley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points that we know why the cycle was taken away, because it was dangerous, and we was told it was dangerous, so we had to act immediately. And we also know that in the plan, Mr Smith, I didn't interrupt you, thank you. I did give you... I didn't interrupt anyone.
Excuse me, madam. You're not registered to speak. If you keep quiet,
Okay.
please. No, this is not a debating chamber.
I'm being honest now, and okay, it was closed because it was dangerous. It was inspected and closed. There is going to be a new one built, as we know. So if our portfolio holder could probably just bring us up to date with where we are with the additional funding, if you could, please. Thank you.
Councillor Markham, I'm happy for you to have something to add to this.
So I can't update you on the additional funding because we have a meeting on Monday with ministers. After that meeting, hopefully I can update people, but we are still trying to get the extra funding that we need.
Thank you, Councillor Markham. Councillor Hammersley, had you finished, or have you got more to say?
No, that's it. Thank you very much. It was answered politely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammersley. Any other speaker on this? Councillor Watkins?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Some of what I was going to say has already been picked up, as in the measured miles and that. We have got some, but again, are not advertised. We've also got some cycle routes and some walking routes throughout the borough, and I've been trying to get these advertised for years. You can trust me on this one. But if you haven't got them, I've got no problem sending you them on email. I'll send them you on email just in case. But to advertise these cycle routes that are marked out and walkways that we have got, that won't cost us nothing. But it's like it says on your pamphlet, get out active for life. These things are things that we do in this borough, but we just don't let people know. Again, coming back on the skate parking things like Stockford Rec, I've seen people getting off buses from Inkley to go to that skate park. That was the first concrete skate park within the borough. And again, you know, we don't let people know that we've got skate parking, we've got BMX in, we've got, and when the BMX track was put in Stockford Rec, for instance, that cut antisocial behaviour by 50%, and it keeps people active. So keeping people active also cuts antisocial behaviour, but again, a lot of these things need to be done in our parks. And we've got a lot of the stuff, we just don't advertise it. But I will send you some of the stuff tomorrow anyway. Thank you.
Mrs. Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really interested in the employees having an MOT. That must have meant that a number of people, quite a lot of people, have had access to MOT. Now, I'm just wondering if perhaps that could be extended to the public. And I'm quite sure from the government there would be grants for that, for setting up clinics, for walk-in clinics, for MOTs. So I think that's something that could well be looked at. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Ross. Katie, do you have any response to that particular point? 'Cause I believe is it funded by an external provider?
Yeah, the MOTs that were conducted for employees was obviously funded by just internally via the leisure contractor. We could look into whether there's opportunities for wider health MOTs. I'm aware that I think it's something that is offered within the leisure contract for members, but we can certainly take that away and have a look into that in more detail and see if there's an opportunity there for residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Baxter-Payne.
Yeah, just on the very last page of the report, actually, it's got future projects and stroke actions. And it's actually down there to revamp the markings of the measured mile walks. But the one thing that I noted that is missing that I think should be put on those future actions is to promote the good work that we're already doing and get out there, because it doesn't mention on the future actions to promote ourselves better and promote what is being done already good. Because I say it's down there. There's lots of things we can do and there's lots of things we are doing. But also as well, like the deliver more scootability training, it would be nice for groups or centres to actually know where they can approach to get that, to put that training on.
Do you wish to pick up any of those points at all, Katie? Or?
Just to say thank you for the comments. It's just to note that we've now got a full team back within the sports development team, and one of those positions, the leisure development officer post, is to increase the social media presence of the Active for Life page. So we'll take these comments away and we'll build that into that work that we're starting to do in encouraging more footfall through that channel. So thank you, Chair.
Councillor Caldecott.
Yeah, thank you. It's all very interesting, and I think particularly having extra capacity, I think we need, particularly in the parks, we've got a little hole where walking and things tend to fall between the parks and the activities, and the parks have not had any capacity for the last year or two to try and progress some of these projects. So maybe if the leisure side have got some capacity to do some of these things, the parks can effectively let the leisure team progress some of these things a bit more. And we have got £2,000 from the County Council's Green Shoots to try and do some of the paths and signage in Weddington. And although that'll be a parks type thing, it obviously then ties in with this leisure side. So I think we need to get the two departments sharing resources better, and also if we have got new officers, using them to take some of the burden off the parks, because we can't get anything done quickly because the parks officers are spending all their time on planning applications. So effectively everything just grinds to a halt because of the capacity problems. So if leisure's got capacity, I think it would help. Thank you.
Any other member? Thank you. In which case, just a couple of points from myself then, Katie, which is the employee newsletter. I guess that's online.
Yeah, it's shared via email to employees on an attachment. Yeah.
Thank you. And obviously, it's a really encouraging report in many respects. I particularly welcome the fact that 1,000 kids a week are using the BMX track, which is just brilliant, really. On the health MOTs, is this an ongoing project that we'll be doing annually, or was it a one-off?
Initially, it was to see if there was the uptake and the engagement was there, but it's something that we're trying to get with our leisure partner to have on a regular basis, to make sure that it's a provision that is there annually or more frequently if we can accommodate.
Thank you. Just, if there's no other contributions, to go back to the recommendation on this, it was to note the report and to ask questions. I think that we've done that. Everybody happy to note the report? Thank you very much. In which case, then we can now move on to item 9, the Integrated Performance Report. But I would like to say thank you, Katie, for your contributions tonight. Can we move on with the report, please?
Yeah, you can, Chair. The end of financial year summary for 2022-23 is as follows. Appendix A, finance linked to performance. As touched on earlier, the finance data isn't available, and I understand that the final outturn is going to Cabinet in July, and it's intended that a report will be provided to scrutiny panels after that related to the finances. In relation to performance, of the 7 measures within the remit of the panel, 1 has improved, 3 have declined, 2 stayed the same, and 1 has no trend comparison. The declined performance measures are processing of new benefits claims, processing of change of circumstances benefits claims, and the percentage of waste recycled and composted. In relation to Appendix B, the Strategic Risk Register, as at the end of the 4th quarter, the breakdown according to net risk of the 11 risks within the remit of the panel is 4 net amber and 7 net green. Net meaning given the mitigations that are in place. Those 4 net amber are R9, failure to effectively manage health and safety, R16, cybercrime or attack, R20, pandemic, service, social and economic implications, and R25, non-compliance with freedom of information and general data protection regulations. There have been a number of key updates this quarter. I'll just run through those. There are about 6 or 7. So R3, risk R3, a contractor or supplier cannot deliver a service. Monitoring of material supply and prices as data has moved from existing to planned mitigations. R7, a breakdown of council services. Added a reference to cloud-based IT service replacing server rooms, and a planned action has been added to refresh directorate business continuity plans. R10, effectively manage the council's finances. Clarification of training for officers and elected members, and reference to ongoing review of the level of reserves as part of the budget setting process have been added. R11, NABCEL unplanned liabilities. A planned action has been added relating to review of the NABCEL business case by the client officer. R15, capital investment priorities. A planned action has been added to review and update the HRA business plan. R16, cyber security. Public Services Network annual compliance certification is now back in place. And finally, with the risk register, R25, freedom of information and data protection. A planned action has been added to do a refresh of the corporate information governance group. Moving on to Appendix C, which is the Strategic Performance Report Executive Summary. 8 of the measures are classed as green, 3 are amber, and 4 are red. The amber and red measures, which are shown under areas for improvement, are rent collection, processing of new benefits claims, working days lost to short-term sickness absence, working days lost to long-term sickness absence, short-term return to work interview compliance, building a better borough corporate plan monitoring, and the staff annual development reviews. Appendix D, freedom of information and environmental information requests. The end of year summary is 761 were received, 755 completed, 143 were outside the 20-day response time, and 6 were outstanding. And finally, Appendix E, complaints. 1,102 were received, 1,092 were completed, 262 of those were outside the 10-day response time, and 10 were outstanding. And that's the summary for the Integrated Performance Report, Chair.
Many thanks. Mr. Smith, you've indicated to speak on this item as well.
No figures in this report, no financial figures. This is a major concern for residents who would just like to know how much debt this council is in. What are the repayments on this, and what future debt this council is seeking to incur on the back of residents? Is that a question that can be answered tonight? Didn't think so. With ever increasing number of residents falling into poverty and unable to pay their utility bills and food costs, what plans does this council have to deal with the inevitable shortfall when the residents cannot pay your demands? Will it be the unlawful use of subcontractors, thugs, to try and bully and intimidate people into giving in to your demands?
Mr.
Smith,
you need to stick to the
this
agenda.
is a very real
this is not part of the
possibility
report.
as this council spirals into
Mr. Smith,
bankruptcy.
I'm sorry, this is not part of the report that you're speaking to now. Can you stick to the report, or I'll move on?
Talking about the finance.
You're not talking about the finance, Mr. Smith. You're
And
casting
the
aspersions.
problems people have in the borough that don't seem to affect you lot.
Mr. Smith,
Strangely.
we're not here to debate this. You're here to speak to the agenda.
I asked the
item, or
question,
not
he
speak.
couldn't answer the question. Answer that question, I'll be quiet then. How much do we owe? Yeah? What is that costing us? And how much more do you intend to borrow?
Thank you. I'm moving on. Any member?
Can't answer it? Can you not answer it?
Mr. Smith?
That's you should know that. Everybody else in the borough does. Everybody else in the borough knows that because they've had to cut their cloth. Why don't he know it?
Any member wishes to speak on this, please? Councillor Kenner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask a question about FOIs. I know we have quite a few outside of the 20-day response time scale, but this is more overarching than just those. Do we know how many FOIs came from residents and how many have come from councillors? And if we do, do we know if we've had high numbers from certain individuals? Thank you.
Steve, are you able to give us some information about that? Or is it something we can perhaps respond to in writing afterwards?
I certainly haven't got the full details of anything like that. As I say, my role is to pull the information together, but I can always go back and get a breakdown from the officer who's responsible.
I think that would be desirable, please. Councillor Condacor, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing is, about a week ago, I asked for the waste and recycling data to be broken down because we've got an appalling fall in performance. 31.4% is nowhere near where we need to be in a climate change emergency, and actually an emergency of resources as well. We know the problems we've got oil, we know the problems we've got aluminiums and metals. We really need to be doing better at recycling. And the national recycling target was 50%. High performing councils were supposed to be at the 70%, and we're at 31%. So I did ask officers to provide me the breakdown of how much is recycling and how much is composting. Because one thing about composting is you get a dry year and the tonnage goes down, and that's not the fault of the council. Whereas for recycling, how wet or dry it is doesn't really make much difference. And unfortunately, the officers were unwilling to provide that data without me going through you and doing a long, laborious thing, which I haven't got round to doing. But I think the recycling target and how it's going wrong is a serious issue. And the county council hosts a Warwickshire Waste Partnership, and they get quarterly data. They get wonderful data. So I do not understand why we don't get our subset of that data provided to this committee, because we're looking at waste and recycling. It's going really badly, and we should actually be able to see what aspects of it are going badly, because, I say, we don't even know how much is waste that's being recycled and how much is waste that's being composted. The second thing on the risk register, R10, failure to effectively manage council finances, it says this is now a moderate low risk, and yet we're doing massive capital projects which we cannot yet start because we can't afford to do them, like the leisure centre. When we do get the go-ahead, if we do to do them, we'll be borrowing at 4 or 5% interest rates, far higher than when the projects were first looked at. I think the hotel, when they first started, interest rates were looking around just under 2%. Yeah, we're now doing big projects where we'll be paying 4 or 5%, and it's a serious risk for this council because it's trying to do tens of millions of pounds of projects: Bridge to Living, the leisure centre, the cinema, the bouncy castle bit, the new multi-storey car parks. We've got massive amounts of capital expenditure. We haven't borrowed for it, and the risk register seems to say our thing is low, when actually we're £1 million over budget each year. We don't have borrowing pre-done early because we're not allowed to, and we have no financial data, no medium-term financial plan, and we've seen this last week Woking Council effectively become bankrupt. The finance officer has had to issue a section, was it 114 or whatever? And we seem to be doing exactly the same thing. And we're flying blind because we don't have a medium-term financial plan. How can you run tens of millions of pounds of projects and have no medium-term financial plan? We don't have an up-to-date borrowing forecast of how much we're borrowing and how much interest rates. And we yet don't have the end-of-year outturn, but it looks like we're £900,000 overspending. It looks like this council's a financial basket case. So how can risk 10 be low moderate? I'd like that explained. Thank you.
Councillor Croft, as you're here tonight, I don't know if you can... I believe that we've given an explanation in the past about why we're not borrowing in advance of projects, but are you able to re-summarise that for Councillor Condacor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The reason we don't borrow in advance is because obviously interest rates fluctuate. If we were to borrow in advance of projects, we would be locked into a potentially higher rate, and we would then have to pay it back. Now, the Section 151 officer and myself are very alive to the risk to cash flow, and we are constantly monitoring it. And we are, as you will see in the Treasury report that comes, we are working to make sure when we do need to borrow, to look at alternative options. So, for example, borrowing between local government, which would come at a potentially lower rate. So I don't think there's a need for alarmism on this sort of thing. We have priced in already the overspend in the budget. In the in-year budget that's just closed, and we formed the capital programme on that basis in February. So we do need to be very careful of this sort of alarmist talk from Councillor Condacor. And that, I'll leave it there, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Condacor, I will come back to you, but I have other speakers. And I do agree with you about the issue about if there's a subset of data available from Warwickshire County Council, perhaps we can obtain that and have it forwarded to us for information purposes on the recycling issues. But I have... Councillor Watkins, did you indicate you wish to speak?
Hi Steve, always good to see you. Thank you for the report. I'm pretty confident we've asked this before, but it may have slipped. There's no report on here of members' inquiries. So can we have that in the future? You know how we have to go for the members' inquiries on self, because there is a few of them still outstanding. Well, I've got one that's been outstanding for over a year. Are you aware of what I'm talking about? No. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll email you one, and then if you tie up with John Sharrett, he'll explain it to you. But I think it would be useful to see that on a report, to see how many members have inquired about having work done. Thank you.
In terms of freedom of information, you mean?
No. So, whereas you've got complaints down there, this is totally separate. This is members doing it.
Right.
Only it's done on another form.
On Dash?
No,
on the Dash
we've not got access to Dash.
Right, okay, that's where I'm confused. All right.
Yeah.
So there's a separate process for members to report issues.
Yeah, it's called members inquiry. But
Members inquiry.
yeah, actually, it does go through customer services. Well, not all of them. So some of them goes direct to a department. But it would be interesting to see how many members are inquiring about things. It doesn't have to be in your ward. It can be wherever you see it. I'll send you an example, but if you talk to John, he might be able to give you some more information. Thank you.
Right, will do.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Just like to ask if other members think they would like to see that as part of the report. I think we can take that as an agreement then. Thank you. Any other member? I've got you, Councillor Condacor. You wish to speak again, I believe.
Yeah, I want to come back on Councillor Croft's comments about why we don't borrow in advance. That wasn't my comment. My comment was because we're not allowed to borrow in advance, it actually is creating a risk for us because we then have to borrow in the future for things we're doing in the future. And that my question was, why are we still on green risk? Because obviously interest rates are looking at the sort of 5% area. When we plan these projects are on 2%, clearly we now have a risk of how we borrow. Like if the cinema is going to cost us, to make the maths easy, say 10 million, it would cost us 200,000 to pay the interest on it. Now it will cost us 500,000 to pay the interest on it. So it's basically could wreck all our business cases. So why is our risk still green when we've got a massive future uncertainty over the interest rates paying and we haven't yet borrowed or even agreed to borrow for the projects we're doing? And if I may, while I've got the microphone, on freedom information requests, we also have the issue where there's a member inquiry, I asked for some data, the council is now asking me to put a freedom information request in it, which is ludicrous because it means that my work on this committee is actually generating freedom information requests when actually I should, as a committee member, be seeing things as a councillor, which shouldn't then be raising freedom information requests and getting me criticised for doing too many freedom information requests. A classic example are the emails about Civic Hall, where a member of the public asked for the emails about the Civic Hall reports. He was provided, or she, the information, and when I asked for that information so I can ask questions about it today, I was told I had to put a freedom information request in, when it's part of my work as a councillor to ask about Civic Hall, particularly being on this panel. So I think two things. We need to sort out why some of these risks are green when clearly we are in a very risky, dangerous thing, and the freedom information request needs separating out from members' inquiries. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Any other member? Councillor Baxter-Payne.
I think we've just got to be very careful with this point about why a risk is green, because from how I understand it from the risk assessment, the risk here, very serious or red, is the risk. But if Steve can confirm this, the reason that the net risk is moderate or green is because the mitigation put in place to manage that risk means that it's at a low risk because we are doing the processes correctly to ensure that we're not taking a higher risk. I mean, that's how I understand a risk assessment to work. You look at the risk and then you put a process in place or a system of work in place to minimise the actual overall risk, which is why we've got a green risk. So to me, this says if it's a green risk, the systems that the council has in place around the financial effectiveness of the council's finances are sufficient enough to lower that risk down to a green.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter-Payne. Could you confirm, Steve?
Yeah, I can confirm the council is exactly right. Yeah, the gross risk is if we do nothing. The net risk is given the mitigations that we put in place that we feel that's where we are.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I mean, it's like anybody who engages in a sport that would be considered to be hazardous. You like scuba diving or something. You take mitigating procedures to make sure accidents don't happen. Councillor Condacor.
Yeah, I think the problem on that point, and I think this is why we need to explain it, is we cannot mitigate some risks all the way down to green. If I carried a bucket of petrol into this room, that's incredibly dangerous. The mitigation might be to have fire extinguishers and things, which would lower the risk and mean we can do something about that bucket of petrol. It doesn't mean you can mitigate that all the way down to green. if the risk, if the things you're doing to mitigate only partly reduce it. And we, as I said, we haven't got the medium-term financial plan. We're eating our reserves up due to overspending. So all the sources of assurance on page 135 are going wrong. So I cannot understand how the risk is green when other councils are going bankrupt.
Any other member? Mr. Smith, you had your chance to speak. I'm moving straight on. Any other member? Right. Okay. Mr. Smith, thank you. Right. So the purposes, I think we've observed the report. We've asked questions about it. I'm happy to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 10A, which is the work programme suggestion forms. I notice we have 3 of these submitted by Councillor Watkins. But you wish to speak on them, Mr. Smith. So while you're here, why don't you speak on them now?
The grand opening's been announced, so yeah. Scrutiny, just to avoid scrutiny of the project, probably on time and within budget. 2 years, 600,000. It's a bit of an insult to anyone that's worked in construction. That the building was already being used to house people in an emergency accommodation situation. So what was done to it that cost 600,000, heaven only knows. But they have installed a dog walking area. Will this be open to the public, or will they still have to use the streets and the green spaces around the area? Any idea? Ridiculous.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Right. So we have the items in front of us. Do you wish to speak on this, Councillor Watkins?
Yes, please, Chair. Yeah, I've actually sent this to a couple of housing ones in the past, but they've been rejected by the housing communities chair and the scrutiny group. What I want here is some open and honest figures, really. So what I've asked for is the original budget that was set. Now I have been told that that was sent a few months ago, and so I asked for it to be sent again. Now I've received that again, but straight away on the first line there's some discrepancies in that, because it says purchase costs of 655,000. Well, I've got the delegated budget that says the purchase cost was 635,000. So there's a discrepancy there straight away. We need to look at this, go through it, and scrutinise the whole thing, because I need to know what the budget was set when they decided to purchase this and convert it, and also what the finished budget was when it was finished. Well, it's been announced again this week. This week it's going to start having people in, but also the delay in taking people in and how much that's cost us, because it was supposed to have been taking people in last August, and I have got that in paperwork, so I know that that is supposed to have been true. There's a lot of things here that are not transparent. And I think that all of these things should come to this scrutiny panel, let us all look at them, go through them and see if we're happy as the Finance and Public Services Scrutiny Group. So I'll start there, and if there's any further questions, Chair, I should be able to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I'm not sure if all members have had the response on this. So I'll read out the response that I think you were given on this, which is basically the information relating to the budget for this item, this is item 10A, was provided to the OSP in October 22. The project is now in its final phase and is due for handover in June 2023. I think there's actually been some press coverage about this recently. It will then be furnished and guests accommodated shortly thereafter. The directors responded that they're not clear where the August 22 occupation date referred to in the form is from, but they will take some further research into this matter to make sure nothing's been missed. The current spend profile projects the potential overspend on the project at £5,000 against a budget of 1.296 million, inclusive of purchase costs, which is an overspend of 0.38%. I went back personally and queried the overspend, and the cost of furnishing is actually included in the 5,000 overspend, exclusive of carpets and things which are wear and tear items. I would like to make a suggestion on this, which is the project is almost complete, and we want to get to the bottom of it. That we bring this back to this committee later in the year, possibly September or so. Once the actual thing has been handed over, we've got all the data, and we can actually go into this in detail as you request. I don't want to obscure. I think it should be an open project, all the data available. But I would prefer to take this back when we've all had a chance to look at the information and bring it back to a future scrutiny panel in September, if that's okay. Councillor Condacor, you've indicated to speak.
The idea of this shelter accommodation was really good, but it's the implementation we got a lot of problems with, because it was supposed to save us something like £400,000 a year by having it. So yeah, it's really useful to have more accommodation. But if it's a year late, that's effectively a loss of £400,000 that we could have saved if the project had been better managed. I understand we agreed to purchase this thing something like April 2021. So it'll be 2.5 years almost by the time it's finished and open. We could have built something quicker. And as an engineer, I like to have Gantt charts go through, and you say what you're going to do before you start, and then you actually measure how optimistic you were. We've never had a proper project plan for this thing. We've just asked questions, myself and Councillor Watkins at various meetings, and it's always been, oh, it's on budget and it's going to be open in August, or it's been a continuously moving feast. And I think we've lost out on the savings we could have had if this had been managed quickly like a commercial operation. And there are people doing accommodation in this borough. There are people buying up old clubs and churches and all sorts, converting them in old offices and doing it in sort of 9 months. So the question is not how much is spent, but how we spent that much money doing it so slowly. So I think we do need to do this as a matter of urgency, because we've got other projects which we do not know. I think there's one in King's House in Bedworth, and we just don't know what's going on with that. What's the budget for that? When's that supposed to open? And if we only discuss things 2 or 3 years later when they've all been messed up, then we're not learning lessons. And I think this is a great project to learn lessons from, to see how much we thought it cost, how long it would take, and how long it really took. And I'm a great fan of Channel 4 Grand Designs. I don't know if you watch that programme, Chair, but once you watch it regularly, you watch the beginning and you know this project someone says will take 12 months, will take 2 years. And that's the sort of knowledge we need as a council, so actually we get better at doing these projects.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Any Councillor Downs?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd be interested to see the figures, because if the council agreed to purchase it in April 21, well, that wasn't even under our leadership, because we didn't take over till May 21. But I would like to see everything that we've got on this project. As most people know, I'm a qualified project manager and construction director. Yes, it's coming on budget, thereabouts. 5,000 overspend, whoopie-doo. Someone spent some more on some bricks. But I would like to see the details, Chair, if I can. I'd like to see exactly where the money's been spent, what it's been spent on, yeah, and who with. Because a project like that taking this long, they really should have not overspent. They should come in on a massive underspend, because the quotes that they should have been a full risk by the contractor, not by the council. Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Downs. Mrs Ross.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This actually, to me, smacks of incompetence, and I just wonder, are the people who are responsible for it, are they to be named, and what are the penalties? And I think that should come out in any report in August. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kenner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I'm not quite sure what's happening here. That the Cabinet's provided a wealth of information on this subject for, well, as long as I can remember while being a councillor. A £5,000 overspent on a budget this big when inflation's running at 10% is good news. It's not bad news. I don't know where the incompetence is, or where where the confusion is. What we've seen so far is actually good news. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kenner. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come back in, Chair. Right, I'll try and explain, and I'll say it slowly so that you can understand. The delegated budget was 635,000 to buy it. On the report that I'm looking at, it says to buy it 655,000. So there's 20,000 gone astray somewhere then. I've asked from day one what the budget is to be spent on this refurbishment of this, and I've not been told. Even today, even at this scrutiny, even though I've put the work programme in, we have not got the budget. You've heard your own cabinet member stand up in this chamber and say it'll be about 730,000. I don't see a 730,000, but that was said in this chamber. So there's lots of figures floating around, and we are a finance and public services overview and scrutiny panel. I know that some of you have done the training in here, and so I know that you understand what you're supposed to do in the scrutiny panel. And this is a typical example of what we do in the scrutiny panel. Somebody brings something forward like this, and you scrutinise it. You get all of the emails in, you get all the figures in, and you find out what, if anything, went wrong, and if it went wrong, and then you put it right so that it doesn't happen again. That's the job of the scrutiny panel. When it was first kicked about, it was kicked about as an 18-bed accommodation. It ended up as a 14-bed. So it's down four bedrooms straight away. At the time, 635,000 would have bought us 4 2 or 3 bedroom houses in the same location. So we could have had pet dwellings there, or pet hotels, or whatever they called it, to sell this a little bit better. But we could have had 4 accommodations in that same area. I live in this area, so I know what the accommodation goes for. What also I cannot get my head around is why the need to urgently buy this at 635,000 or 655,000 or whatever it was that it was bought at. Because I put an alternative property forward for them to buy, and that was 325,000 and the same size. But we went ahead and bought something for double the price, the same size. So there's lots of questions that the scrutiny panel should be asking. And if nobody believes that I'll put property forward for consideration, there it is, purchase price, 325,000. That was at the same time as this was brought. So that's why I think this needs to be brought to scrutiny, Chair. Lots of questions to ask, lots of work to be done. And it's to try and make sure that if there was a mistake, and I'm not saying there was, that we don't make the mistake again. And to make sure that everything that is brought to us is transparent. I know there's an email going around that says the budget was 515,000. Now, I know that that email is around, and I know that other councillors know that email is around. So where is the 515,000? So how much over budget has it gone? Or hasn't it gone over at all? Perhaps it was £1 million budget, we just don't know about it. We've got to ask questions. Well, we've not got to, it's up to this panel. So I'll leave it there, Chair.
Councillor Condacor.
I think Councillor Watkins hit on a very key point, that it was supposed to be 18 flats or 18 bedrooms, whatever. So 18 bedrooms for 1.3 million would be quite reasonable. 14 bedrooms for 1.3 million is almost 100,000 per room. We could have bought off-the-shelf accommodation for a developer, particularly because we wanted to bulk buy for that sort of money. And I know flats at Cleaver Gardens go for about 90,000, which are 2-bedroom flats. So I think we need to see the business case effectively, because that would have had the 18 bedrooms for this much money and effectively what the outturn was 2.5 years later.
Thank you. Councillor Kenneth.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. I mean, from everything we've heard in the past, the delays in purchasing the property were due to vendors' plans change. I mean, as Labour, they should realise the mistakes they made on Gresham Road. And I suggest Councillor Watkins perhaps takes a look in the mirror, because I understand the property he suggested wasn't viable, and he had a veto over this property when he was portfolio holder.
Thank you. Look, I'm not going to get into a tit for tat here.
Chair, I cannot let that be said in public on film. That is rubbish, absolute rubbish.
Okay.
I had nothing to do with the purchase of this property, nothing.
Well, can I just suggest that, as I said earlier, there's no intention to disguise anything here. We want to get everything out discussed, that we defer this until the project is complete, all the invoices are paid, and we can bring it back to a proper scrutiny panel at the appropriate time. We're very early in the municipal year, so we've got plenty of time to bring this forward in sort of September, or whenever that sort of meeting is, I think. We can add it to the work programme and bring it back. And I'm quite happy with that. Councillor Hammersley, you wish to speak?
Yes, that there are some questions here going on Mr. Watkins, what he's asked, that there appears to be some anomalies which have not been answered. And again, me being on the scrutiny panel, there are questions with numbers, figures and amounts, which I'm not happy with myself either. So I would like, for the same reason, figures that have been branded around, what are the right figures, which were quoted, which was on the paperwork, etc., etc. And Mr. Watkins, I'm not taking sides, but I would like to know answers to similar questions, the purchase price from the start to the finished price at the end, and if anything changed, the reasons why. So again, the deferral would be good, and to give chance for these answers or questions to be looked into. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Condacor, I think we've had a good go at this, and I'm going to ask everybody, is everybody okay to move this onto the work programme as is suggested, and that we bring it back at a meeting at a point when the project is complete, the invoices have been paid during this municipal year, so we can have a go at this. Is everybody happy with that? Councillor Condacor, one minuscule thing, and I hope it is.
I think when we look at this, we also need to compare it to buying from the market, because that had been a lot quicker. So in doing scrutiny, scrutinise this project and compare it to actually buying flats on the market?
I think that the overall scrutiny of this will be of the project as a whole, what happened, what was supposed to happen, what is the outcome. But as we're all happy to take it onto the work programme, that's great. I'll move on to agenda item 10B. Do you want to introduce this one?
Yes, thank you again, Chair. Again, this is, as it says on the tin, really. At the last full council, well, not the last full council, because that was mayor making, but the council before that, it was agreed that there was a lot of underspending, and that we should, if we wanted to do anything, then look at bringing it to scrutiny. So the one I've got here is the remodelling, the independent living unit remodelling, and I'd like to look at, again, different things in this of what's happened, of why it hasn't been done. When it was first in the budgets of £1 million to look at the remodelling, what that means, because for example, we have in between 30 and 40 units every week, difficult to let, so they've not let, basically. That is because they're not fit for purpose. They were built back in, I don't know, late 60s, early 70s, something like that, and the bed sits where you would have a bed in, pull the curtain, things like that. So that's to just give you a little bit of background on it. And also, on the difficult to lets, because some of them have been empty for a number of years, we will pay 200% council tax on them. So we're paying out a lot of money for things that are not fit for purpose anymore. So we should have done this a long time ago. It's been in the budget for a long time, £1 million to spend on it. So we've promised people that we're going to do this. We keep spending money because we haven't done it. And recently we've told people in 4 or 5 bedroom houses that we need them to consider moving to something else. Well, this would be something else if it was remodelled. So perhaps if we gave them somewhere to look at, they might consider moving from a 4 or 5 bedroom house. So again, lots of questions in this, Chair. And I think one of the first ones would be, when was this £1 million first put in to have this work done? Why hasn't it been done yet? It could be something as simple as, we just haven't got the team. Then fine. Let's see if it would be cheaper to hire a team in. I don't know what the answers are going to come back, Chair. That's why it's here as a work programme, so that we can look at it, see how much money has been lost in rent and council tax and things on the difficult to let ones. Like I say, it is a bit of a can of worms, but it is, in my opinion, a good work programme item for us to look at as the finance and public service scrutiny. So I'll leave that there, Chair.
So the question is whether we take this item onto the work programme again. Just before I bring you in, Councillor Kenner, I have a response from the officers on this particular one, which I can read out, which is basically that budgetary provision for this project was made prior to the current economic climate, and importantly, before the introduction of the Housing White Paper by government. This paper has placed an amended regulatory focus and a requirement for new activities and services upon social housing landlords. These new activities and services placed an increased financial burden on the HRA. Therefore, and in discussion with the Section 151 officer and the portfolio holder, all requirements, including any amendments to the independent living stock, will be considered as part of a fundamental review of the HRA. This is because the Council must demonstrate a viability over the 30-year life of the HRA business plan and must meet all of its legislative requirements, including the additional requirements contained within the work paper, within the white paper, apologies. So, Councillor Kenner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of what I was going to say has already been mentioned, but we've had global economic meltdown, we've had to wait for a white paper, we've had a corporate restructure to ensure projects can be done effectively and to the benefit of the borough and its residents. I was going to say that there is already a full review in place of this in conjunction with finance. So I propose that we vote against this particular suggestion because there's already something happening by the council. There's nothing for us to review just yet. I'd rather wait till it's complete and then have another look. But right now, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be duplicating officers' work. Thank you.
Councillor Kennett, you've made a proposal. Does that receive a second? Okay, Councillor Baxter-Payne. Okay, before we move to a vote on it, obviously you've indicated to speak, and so has Councillor Condacor. I'll take Councillor Condacor first.
I think one of the things this committee is about is the financial aspects of it, and some of it obviously sits for housing. So maybe a very small work programme item, just to actually look at the finance bits of it, particularly us paying council tax for empty units at double rates. So rather than be a big bit of work for stuff that's going on in the future, I think we do need to actually, even if it's start with a briefing note from officers as to what's happening, particularly around the finance, because you just burn money if you've got independent living units that are sitting empty and we pay council tax, because as Dennis Harvey and everyone used to say, we only keep 13% of that. So 87% of that council tax we pay on our own empty units ends up sitting to the police and the county council. So I do think we need to look at this, but maybe if Councillor Kennedy and all this are saying there's other stuff going on, I think we need to divide out the finance bit and what we can do. And it may even be something as trivial as redesignating these empty units as offices or something else, so we even save the council tax on them. But I think we do need to look at this area of the independent living that's sitting empty, because it is a lot of wasted money.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Watkins, you indicated.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Quite amazing, really, that you're going to try and vote against this and you don't want to look at the implications that this has had on our finances when we're a Finances and Public Service Overview and Scrutiny panel. You haven't even asked how long it's been in the budget. Absolutely stunning. You don't want to know how much it's lost as in rent. You don't want to know how much it's lost as in council tax. You're not cared, because you say there's some work going on. Well, if the work had been done 2 or 3 years ago, it had already been done and we wouldn't have lost out that money. So, by putting this on as a work programme, you would find out why the work hadn't been done, and then perhaps be able to fix the problem. You can't fix a problem if you don't ask the question, but you're not even willing to ask the question. This ain't a scrutiny panel. This is just groupthink, and you've probably been whipped to vote against me. I'll leave that there, Chair.
I'll take your point of order, and I'll bring Councillor Downs afterwards. Okay, Councillor Downs.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Watkins just said it should have been done 2-3 years ago. He was in control then, not us. I rest my case. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Watkins.
Just to clarify, I said it could have been done 2 or 3 years ago, and we would find that out if we brought it to a working group. We would find out when this was put in. But you're obviously not going to do that. Okay.
Councillor Baxter-Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take the politics out of this for a minute, because I think the politics is actually losing the point here. There's work being done. So if there's work being done, what are we going to scrutinise? We should be scrutinising what is coming forward. Because if there's work being done, it's been accepted that there's a problem. So the work being done to resolve the problem, we should be scrutinising what's being done, and we should be looking at what that is going to save. If we're here to look at the finances, so what will we actually be scrutinising? And if this work could have been done 3 years ago, why wasn't it done 3 years ago? So I want to see what is coming forward, and I want to scrutinise what we're going to be doing moving forward, not what we should have been doing and not what we could have done that we didn't do. So there must have been a reason at the time why the work wasn't done, or it would have been done. So why has this now suddenly raised its head and become an issue? So I think that the point of deferring it isn't that we don't want to look at it, It's that we want to see what is coming forward and scrutinise what is going forward in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter-Payne. I'm conscious that we have a proposal that's been seconded on the table here, so I'll quite happily move to the vote on that. All those in favour of Councillor Kenner's proposal, please show. All those against? Can we record that, please? Thank you. Moving on to item 10C, Councillor Watkins, would you like to introduce this one?
Yeah, again, this is going back to full council and saying that if we wanted to ask any questions, then we can bring them to scrutiny. So this is the homeless hostel conversion. I have actually got the figures wrong. It says 200,000. It's actually 250,000 because there's 50,000 in the general fund budget. Again, there should have been lessons learned here, especially with COVID, because we've got a lot of hostels that have got shared bathroom and kitchen facilities. So there wasn't very good when COVID was around. So this work does need to be done to avoid anything going forward like that. It's what it says on the work form, Chair, and it's to take it forward to see again what the problem is, why it hasn't been done, and to see if if it's a lack of staff, and then we need to address that. But going on the last work programme, you don't even want to look at that. So just go forward on that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I'll give you the officer response on this one as well, which comes out as this work is related to the Gables at Attleborough Road. Thank you, Councillor. I'm merely repeating the officer's response on this. Okay, the 200k external funding was awarded shortly before the current economic issues, whereby increasing inflation has led to increased costs for labour and materials. Plans were drawn up and a procurement exercise undertaken. The results from this were that inflationary increases had taken the costs above the funding available. It was therefore decided to pause the project whilst options for a scaled-back design were considered, as well as ensuring that adequate financial provision was in place. So there's a bit on the next page, yes, do beg your pardon. Yeah, work is shortly commencing, actually due to comments, on a fundamental review of the HRA business plan, and the increased costs associated with this project will be included in this review. So again, I will leave this one to anyone who wishes to speak on it. Councillor Kenner, I've got Councillor Kenner, Councillor Hammersley. Anybody else? Councillor Kenner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just on this particular one, is this not housing work that comes into the housing and communities portfolio? This is the wrong OSP to bring that up in, Councillor Watkins. Yeah, that the HRA comes into housing, they deal with their own finances. From what I can see, this is the wrong portfolio, Chairman. My proposal is to refuse because it's the wrong OSP.
I will come back to your proposal on that. Councillor Hammersley.
Well, that's just put me in a position, if it's in the wrong panel, I can't ask what I want to ask. So...
Why don't you ask anyway? Let's
Okay, all right. Okay, so if it's going to be added, money's added to the 200,000 to get the job done, it is being done. Is that not acceptable?
Councillor Condacott.
Chair, might a way forward as just being asked the officers to provide us a briefing note, and then we can decide what to do with it when we know for the next meeting?
I'd be quite happy to allow the HRA review to take place and then officers to provide a briefing note relevant to this particular project for this panel. And then if we wish to take it onto a work programme or send it to one of the other ones, depending upon whether the consequences are financial or housing related. We look at it then once we've had the HRA review and its report. I'll put that forward as a proposal from the chair if it finds a second. Thank you, Councillor Downs. Sorry, Councillor Watkins, you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Right, so to going on your own budget, there was £200,000 for homeless hostel conversion, and then there was a further 50,000 in the HRA, 200,000 from the general fund. So it's finance, it's at the right scrutiny panel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I'm quite happy with the proposal that I've put forward, which is that we wait for the HRA review and then for an officer's briefing to come to this panel relevant to this particular project. And if it sits with us, which it may well do, we deal with it. If it doesn't sit with us, we refer it to the appropriate panel.
Can we also take some advice on whether this sits with us or whether it will be with...
I think we can take some advice in the interim. Yeah. But on the basis of the proposal which has been seconded, I'm quite happy to move to a vote. Councillor Watkins.
Chair. So when you put a work programme form in, it goes to an officer. The officer then sends it to the correct scrutiny panel. That gives me confidence to say that it's at the correct scrutiny panel. I've already explained that there's some in the HRA, some in the general fund budget for the hostel conversion. Again, it's not been done, so we need to find out why it hasn't been done. But if you're happy to vote against me because you're one group and I'm another, that's fine. Go for it.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. I think we're not voting against you. We're just asking for this to come at a later date once the review's taken place. And as for things going to the right panel, item 10A on here was referred to the housing panel. It's come to us because they decided it sat with us. So I'm happy to move to the vote on this now. Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak?
Point of clarification, you're actually voting to put it on the work programme at a later date, so it'll still be on the list of work programme.
What the proposal is that we wait for the outcome of the housing HRA review, that we get a briefing note sent to this panel.
Would it be on the work programme as a briefing note?
Yes. And then should we decide, having seen it, that it sits better with the other panel, that's fine. But if it sits definitely with us, we'll take it on the work programme. So we're not actually voting against you. We're just coming up with a more pragmatic solution to the problem that you've posed. All those in favour of the proposal? Against? Thank you very much. So that concludes item 10. Moving on to item 11, forward plan, which is for noting. Councillor Condacor, you wish to speak on this?
Yeah, we've got the capital outturn and the capital Q1 performance, etc. on here. I think the capital programme does need to come to this panel probably in September at the same time as the Q1 outturn goes to Cabinet, because, as I said earlier, it is a ginormous programme of work, and I think it does need scrutiny. I think Councillor Markham was talking about a meeting with government soon about financing the leisure centre part of it, but I think it does need to actually be on our programme to at least look at the capital outturn and the capital Q1 to see where we're going. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Any other member wish to speak on this one? Happy to note the work programme then? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 12, the draft work programme, which is on page, page 200. Any member? Councillor Condacor.
I will say again what I said on the capital, on the Cabinet forward plan. Can we have the capital outturn and capital Q1 actually as an explicit item on our work programme for September, so we can actually tie in with what the Cabinet gets told and ask any questions.
Happy with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I've had no notification of any other business, so that being the case, thank you for attendance tonight. Thank you for your contributions. Meeting closed.